Love is a powerful feeling, but it is so treacherous that it can bring immense trouble, turn into hatred or pain. Where there is love, there is always a victim, and sometimes the bright feeling ends in a deadly tragedy. In any crime, evidence of guilt must first be found before holding the perpetrator accountable. In this case, the culprits were so foolish that they recorded their attack on another person on video, thereby providing the police with irrefutable evidence. Today, we will dive into the tragic story of love that turned into betrayal and violence, the story of Ashley Baconegra. And before we get started, be kind enough to support my channel. Subscribe to the channel, like the video, and stay active. It will help a lot. I will be very grateful to you for that. Let's get started. This smart, attractive high school girl sat in front of the officers laughing heartily. She couldn't believe she was being accused of robbery. When the laughter subsided, the policeman made an even more shocking accusation. He said that Janine was also responsible for a person's death. The schoolgirl widened her eyes and asked in surprise, "Who, me?" Early in the morning in August 2022, a young woman named Ashley Baconegra was going about her usual business until she was lured outside. As soon as Ashley arrived at the designated place, she was attacked by two friends, Antonetta Stevens and Janine Gonzalez. The entire fight was captured on a phone camera. This wasn't just a scuffle between rivals, it ended in a horrific tragedy. After it all happened, Janine, who was still a teenager at the time, was called in for questioning by the police. With law enforcement officers, the girl behaved as if she were chatting with friends. She giggled and gossiped throughout the interview. The schoolgirl's behavior seemed very strange, considering what she had done. Ashley Baconegra was born on November 18, 1991, in the Bronx, New York, where she lived with her mother and sister. They jokingly called themselves the Three Musketeers, or Three Superheroes. Ashley grew up a happy child, full of life and energy. From a young age, she took pride in her appearance. As she grew older, she loved makeup and hairstyles. The girl felt more confident when she looked her best. When Ashley turned 20, she started dating a guy named Julian Reyers. In fact, the young people had known each other earlier, but there had never been any romantic relationship between them. In 2012, they started communicating on social media and quickly grew close. So close that they began dating and soon got engaged. Ashley became pregnant and, 9 months later, gave birth to a boy. Her son became the center of her universe. She absolutely adored him. Ashley was described as a very attentive and caring mother, ready to do anything for her child. Around 2015, shortly after the birth of her son, Ashley and Julian decided to pack their bags and try to find a better place to live. That place was Atlanta, Georgia. The couple settled in a new home, but over the years the relationship between Ashley and Julian began to deteriorate. Both partners cheated on each other, but despite the problems, they decided to stay together and try to save the family. In 2021, when their son turned 6, the couple moved to a small, gated community, which they believed would be a safe environment for raising their child. At that moment, the young couple had no idea that this move would become another threat, appearing out of nowhere, turning their lives upside down and ending in complete tragedy. By early 2022, Ashley and Julian had settled into their new place. Everything was going as smoothly as possible for a move. But after that, when life returned to normal, their relationship began to heat up again. In reality, they had long fallen out of love with each other and stayed together only for the sake of their son. There was no more romance between them. They were simply raising their child together, and that suited both of them. At that time, Ashley was determined to build a stable future for her boy. She was an ambitious and hard-working young woman, so she soon got a job at a flooring and decor store in Atlanta. Ashley worked as a manager on the night shift, restocking shelves and organizing employees. During the day, the young woman looked after her son, while at night, the boy stayed with his father. She and Julian raised their son together but hardly saw each other. However, at her workplace, Ashley began to grow close to a man named Daniel Gonzalez, who worked under her supervision. They worked the night shift together and spent a lot of time side by side. Daniel and Ashley initially discussed difficulties in their relationships with their partners, with whom they had children, and eventually, their friendship turned into a full-fledged romance. It all started with flirtatious messages they constantly sent each other. Ashley liked the gentle, charming Daniel, and then the lovers began secretly meeting outside of work. Daniel also lived in the gated community where Ashley resided, so they were practically neighbors. During the day when Ashley's son was at school and her common-law husband Julian was at work, the enamored woman secretly let Daniel into the apartment so they could spend time together. She didn't yet know that the budding romance would soon make her the center of a scandal fueled by jealousy and betrayal. Although Ashley might have suspected that Daniel had unresolved issues from past relationships, she could never have imagined how dangerous the situation would become for her. In fact, Daniel Gonzalez was not free. He lived in the same apartment with a 27-year-old woman named Antonetta Stevens. Antonetta was Daniel's fiancée, with whom he had lived for several years, but they never made it to marriage. The couple even had a 3-year-old son. Also living with them was Antonetta's 9-year-old son, making their situation somewhat similar to Ashley and Julian's. However, this couple had their own difficulties. Daniel and Antonetta's relationship was filled with arguments and unresolved tension. It could hardly be called stable. It was said that Stevens had a bad temper. She was very impulsive and, during arguments, flared up like a match, easily falling into a rage. The partners argued over any issue. Like Ashley and Julian, they stayed together only for the sake of their children. Daniel had long fallen out of love with Antonetta, but hadn't fully broken up with her for financial reasons. Also living in the house with them was Daniel's younger sister, Janine Gonzalez. Janine was only 17 years old. She spent most of her time in Buffalo, New York with her parents, but spent the summer visiting her brother and his family. Janine was incredibly close to Daniel's fiancée, Antonetta. Despite the 10-year age difference, they considered themselves best friends and even sisters. Antonetta was much closer to Janine than her own brother, Daniel. In the summer of 2012, Daniel, his sister, and his fiancée went to Florida for Antonetta's mother's wedding. The celebration was a failure because the couple had another argument. The conflict involved the groom, Antonetta's future stepfather, and a fight broke out between the men. Daniel, clearly fed up with his relationship with Antonetta, was on edge. He seemed to sense that he didn't want to attend this wedding. Fueled by alcohol and the incident with the groom, Daniel decided to confess to his younger sister that he was actually having an affair with another woman from work. The man told Janine about his genuine feelings for Ashley and mentioned that he saw no future with Antonetta. As mentioned earlier, Janine was closer to Antonetta than to her own brother, and this shocking news had the effect of a bomb going off. It set off a chain reaction of events that would affect everyone involved in this matter. Naturally, after Daniel confessed to his sister that he was cheating on his fiancée, the girl ran to Antonetta and, without waiting to return home from the wedding, immediately told her about the other woman, either out of a sense of misguided loyalty or a desire to provoke conflict. So, for Stevens, that day turned into a real nightmare. Antonetta decided that the situation could not be left to chance and asked Janine if she could count on her. Of course, the 17-year-old teenager agreed to participate in the brewing trouble. For her, it was nothing more than a fun summer adventure. Julian Ryers, Ashley Baconegra's former fiancé, didn't know that Ashley was having a romantic relationship with another man, although he later admitted to having some suspicions. Meanwhile, Daniel managed to hide his double life from his fiancée until August 2022. Unlike Julian, Antonetta suspected that something was wrong with Daniel and wondered if he was cheating on her. These suspicions were eventually confirmed by Janine after her brother confessed his feelings for Ashley. In August 2022, before taking any action, Antonetta and Janine decided to first find out who Daniel was having an affair with. They set up surveillance on the man, taking turns watching when, where, and with whom he was interacting. One day, Antonetta saw her fiancé leave work during a lunch break with a young woman and head to a fast food cafe. Stevens rushed to the couple and confronted Daniel, shouting that she had caught him red-handed. Antonetta was furious and ready to cause a scene, but the man tried to smooth things over, claiming that the girl with him was just a colleague. Antonetta was confused. She had just caught her fiancé with another woman, but she wasn't entirely sure if she was his mistress or indeed just a colleague. They weren't doing anything incriminating and seemed to be acting friendly. But Antonetta wasn't quick to drop her suspicions about Daniel. At that moment, she backed off, lacking evidence, turned around, and left. After the confrontation with Ashley and Daniel at the flooring and decor store, Antonetta couldn't stop thinking about the other woman. The confusion in the eyes of her fiancé's supposed colleague suggested that her suspicions were not baseless. This thought kept swirling in Stevens's head and kept her awake. Now she was more than certain that she had caught Daniel with his mistress. And when her fiancé finally returned home after the night shift, Antonetta was already on edge. As soon as Daniel entered the apartment, a heated argument broke out between them. The woman shouted, "How dare you do this to me and the kids?" Then she told Daniel that she no longer wanted to live with him and demanded that he get out of the apartment. The argument continued until 10 a.m. By that time, both partners were exhausted, both physically and emotionally. In the heat of the argument, they said so much to each other that they would surely regret later. In the end, Daniel couldn't take it anymore and went to bed. He hoped that when he woke up, Antonetta would calm down and they would either make up or argue again, but not as intensely. With that thought, the man fell asleep peacefully, not even imagining how it would all end. Because the enraged woman had no intention of calming down or putting the situation off. The betrayal she felt wasn't just about losing Daniel. She felt abandoned and humiliated. Antonetta had dedicated her best years to a man who easily replaced her with someone else. In her eyes, the other woman who stole her fiancé was to blame. Although Daniel was also at fault, Antonetta focused her rage solely on Ashley. Anger and jealousy began to build, turning into something far darker. She confided in Janine, who, instead of dissuading her, further fueled the flames of hatred by offering support and help. At that moment, a crazy idea came to Antonetta's mind. While Daniel was asleep, she stole his phone and found his correspondence with Ashley. A burning resentment toward her rival flared up as Stevens, with Janine, scrolled through the flirtatious messages between the lovers. Antonetta looked at countless heart emojis, read tender words addressed to the other woman, and declarations of love. And the more she scrolled through the messages, the more she got worked up and fell into a rage. Using Daniel's phone, she wrote a message to the mistress and, posing as him, invited Ashley to a meeting, saying he had been kicked out of the house and didn't know what to do. Stevens wanted to lure her rival into a trap to teach her a lesson and make her pay for the pain she was experiencing. Believing the message came from Daniel, Ashley didn't suspect a thing. She hurriedly got dressed and headed to the meeting, expecting to see her beloved man, but instead, she walked into an ambush. Antonetta knew that Ashley lived nearby, so she rushed outside and started looking for her rival. Daniel's sister, Janine, was by her side the whole time, filming the events on her phone camera. As soon as Ashley appeared on the road, Antonetta ran toward her, shouting, "Guess who you were texting with, you bitch?" As soon as Stevens reached Ashley, she struck her in the face with all her strength, knocking her down. Soon, both women were on the ground. Each blow Antonetta delivered was accompanied by insults. She shouted accusations and threats at the mistress. She struck without looking where her hands landed. Ashley tried to defend herself and push the furious Antonetta off, but the odds were uneven. Ashley was very petite and fragile. According to her family members, she had never fought, and despite often wearing sweatpants and a hoodie, she was far from athletic. The 17-year-old Janine held the phone the entire time, cheering on her friend. She was very excited about what was happening and eagerly watched as Antonetta beat her defeated rival. The camera showed that Ashley was genuinely terrified and just wanted it all to end quickly. But Stevens wouldn't let go. She grabbed Ashley by the hair and started slamming her head against the asphalt. The recording captured the sound of her head hitting the pavement with force. Then Antonetta leaned down and bit Ashley on the cheek. To inflict even more suffering, Stevens lied, saying that Daniel himself had asked his fiancée to deal with his mistress while he stayed home with their son. Continuing her frenzied attack, Antonetta shouted several times in a fit of rage that she would kill Ashley. Then the woman ordered Janine to pick up the mistress's phone, which had fallen to the ground during the fight, and take it with them. The most unimaginable thing was that this entire confrontation took place in a gated residential area, right on the road. 2 cars drove past the fighting women, and neither stopped. None of the neighbors who heard the screams came outside or intervened. It's understandable that people didn't want to get involved in others' problems and were concerned only for their own safety, but they could have at least called the police. Driven to hysteria, Ashley began to cry and beg to be let go and left alone. However, Antonetta's anger didn't subside. She kept hitting until she herself ran out of strength. But even then, she didn't get off Ashley. Instead, she turned to Janine and suggested she join in the beating. Still holding the phone, Daniel's younger sister ran up to the defeated woman and kicked her hard in the head and back several times. Ashley was gasping for air, trying to stay conscious, but neither Antonetta nor Janine showed any mercy. Even when Ashley's body began to give out, the attack continued. When the fight finally died down and the friends stopped, they left their rival lying alone on the road covered in bruises and abrasions. Ashley sat in the middle of the street. She looked exhausted and badly beaten. However, despite her condition, she didn't want to leave her mobile phone in Janine's hands. Somehow, Ashley found the strength to stand up. She got up and, with a staggering gait, followed the friends, begging them to return her device. Seeing that the homewrecker wasn't giving up, Antonetta asked if she was ready to die for her phone and told her to come closer. She warned that Ashley would have to take on both of them to get her phone back. Ashley had no intention of fighting. She wasn't in any condition to confront 2 aggressive women. She just wanted her phone back, so she kept following, staggering, behind Janine and Antonetta down the street. All this time, Stevens insulted Ashley with the most offensive words and warned that if she stepped onto her doorstep, she'd regret it. And finally, after 13 minutes of recording, Janine stopped the video. It might seem that 13 minutes isn't long, but when someone is being beaten for that amount of time, they're unlikely to walk away unscathed. Surely, Ashley sustained serious injuries. So Antonetta and Janine reached their apartment. A child ran out to meet them, saying, "Hi, Mommy." But the woman was far more concerned with confronting her fiancé and settling things with him than paying attention to less important details. Antonetta simply ignored her child and headed straight for Daniel. Apparently, at that moment, she was more preoccupied with dealing with the mistress than the fact that the children had been left home alone because their father was still asleep. Antonetta woke Daniel and bluntly told him that she had beaten Ashley and that his mistress was waiting for him outside. Confused from sleep, the man silently opened the front door, saw Ashley covered in bruises and abrasions, and simply slammed the door in her face. He was in shock and couldn't believe this was actually happening. Ashley began knocking and demanding her phone back. Furious, Antonetta threw the phone at the wall near Daniel, after which the man finally returned it to its owner. Getting her phone back, Ashley almost ran toward her apartment, and that could have been the end of it in a best-case scenario. But unfortunately, the aggressive attack by Janine and Antonetta didn't go without consequences. Its outcome was a true tragedy. 30-year-old Ashley Baconegra returned home. Footage from the intercom camera showed the barely alive woman struggling to stand. Soon after, her boyfriend Julian returned to the apartment and found Ashley in a deplorable state. He had no idea what had happened, so he first asked who did this to her. Not wanting to tell the truth about her affair and the attack by the betrayed fiancé, Ashley went out onto the balcony, trying to catch her breath. When the shock wore off, it was replaced by unbearable pain throughout her body. The woman leaned over the balcony railing, trying to calm her heartbeat. These were the devastating consequences of the injuries sustained during the fight. Ashley's condition worsened with every minute. To avoid further questions, she lied to Julian, saying that strangers had attacked her. Seeing the condition of his child's mother, the man put her in the car and immediately took her to the hospital. At the medical facility, Ashley was urgently given emergency care. It turned out that she had several broken ribs and internal injuries. The woman's face and neck were so swollen that she could hardly breathe. But most concerning was that Ashley had severe internal bleeding. Due to the broken ribs, her liver had sustained serious damage. Ashley's condition worsened by the minute. She could no longer breathe on her own, and she was connected to a ventilator. Assessing the risks, the medical staff realized that the injured woman needed specialized care because she was in critical condition. The problem was that they lacked the necessary expertise and equipment, so it was decided to airlift her to a larger medical center where doctors would do everything possible to save the young woman. However, just a few hours after the brutal attack, Ashley Baconegra died from her injuries. Her body couldn't withstand such a severe ordeal. Meanwhile, the police had already arrived at Antonetta and Daniel's apartment. It turned out that there were conscientious neighbors who, noticing the fight, called emergency services and reported the incident. The officers didn't yet know that Ashley Baconegra had died in the hospital, so they were only asking questions about the altercation. Antonetta Stevens blamed everything on Ashley, telling the patrol officers that this woman was sleeping with her fiancé, that she used her position at work to force Daniel to be intimate with her, that she wouldn't leave him alone and threatened to fire him if he refused to engage in intimate relations with her. Now, Ashley had become so brazen that she came to their home, for which she got what she deserved. Stevens tried to shift the blame onto the victim, claiming the fight was mutual and that Baconegra came to her house to cause a scene. Antonetta brazenly made up an explanation for her actions on the spot. She, as if nothing had happened, accused Ashley of attacking her and hoped to get away with it. While telling her version of events, Antonetta cleverly omitted that she was the one who lured Ashley to the complex that day by pretending to be Daniel. Stevens told the police that the day before, she had seen Daniel with Ashley near the store, and her feminine intuition told her that this was the girl he was sleeping with. Antonetta claimed that after their argument, Daniel broke things off with Ashley, but she continued to text and call him, saying she was going to come to their house. The police, having heard one side's explanation, filed a report, recorded Stevens' statement, and left. They didn't yet know how tragic the outcome of this story was. But as soon as the officers received information about the fatal outcome of one of the participants in the incident, they immediately returned to Antonetta's house. It was already late. Daniel had gone to work the night shift. At home were Antonetta, her 2 children, and Janine. The police informed Stevens that Ashley Baconegra had died in the hospital from her injuries. Instead of expressing remorse or horror at what she had done, Antonetta responded with cold indifference, saying she was very sorry it turned out that way. Her face and Janine's, who also participated in the attack, were completely blank, showing no emotions whatsoever. It seemed that Stevens was more concerned about her own situation than the fact that she had taken someone's life. She talked about her family problems, mental health issues, and the difficulties she faced. The woman complained to the officers that she had moved with her fiancé to the gated community to start a new life and didn't expect him to cheat on her with someone from work. Antonetta claimed she had bipolar depression and was going through a tough period, but what she did had no justification. Both women were immediately arrested and taken to the police station for questioning, placed in separate rooms. Antonetta's mood noticeably changed. She tried not to show that she was worried and repeated to the detectives the false story that Ashley came to her house and started a fight. Stevens clearly hoped that by blaming the mistress, who was no longer alive and unable to defend herself, she would escape responsibility for her crimes. Antonetta said she had no intention of harming anyone and sincerely regretted what happened to Ashley. Baconegra allegedly came to the house looking for Daniel and struck Stevens first, after which a fight broke out between them. Antonetta remained reserved and mostly silent, then requested a lawyer. Then the officers questioned Janine Gonzalez. The 17-year-old sister of Daniel behaved very foolishly and defiantly. She giggled strangely and talked about the situation as if she were sharing gossip with her friends. She didn't yet suspect that her freedom was about to be in jeopardy. Janine told the officers that her brother and Antonetta's relationship had been strained lately. They argued constantly, especially after Stevens' mother's wedding in Florida, where Daniel got into a fight with the groom. Despite her age, Janine was mature enough to understand the seriousness of the situation. Although she wasn't the main instigator, her role in the attack made her just as guilty. Janine actively encouraged the violence and egged Antonetta on to hit harder instead of intervening to stop the fight. The officers conducting the interrogation maintained Janine's cheerful mood and played along with her. They understood that in a relaxed atmosphere, the girl would feel more at ease and be more forthcoming. And Janine continued her story, telling the officers about her brother's infidelity. She laughed merrily when she said that Daniel was cheating like all men. The girl genuinely found the situation amusing, even though by then she knew that Ashley had died after their brutal attack. So, Janine told the detectives how she and Antonetta followed Daniel and caught him with Ashley during a work break. The schoolgirl didn't stop giggling, flirting with the officers and making faces. Then she explained how, after stealing Daniel's phone, they sent Ashley a message, and Baconegra, not realizing who she was actually communicating with, rushed to Antonetta's house. Janine also explained to the police that by stealing Ashley's phone, they wanted to text her boyfriend Julian and tell him about the affair to further complicate the rival's life. The girl even managed to insult the deceased's appearance, calling her sick, thin, and too small for a 30-year-old. When asked by the officers if she participated in the beating, Janine downplayed her role, claiming she barely touched Ashley's hair and was just watching from the side. When Janine finished her amusing story, the police charged her with robbery and manslaughter. For a split second, shock flashed across the girl's face. Then she started laughing again until she realized the jokes were over, and the officers were serious. After the charges were read, Janine became a bit gloomier and quieter. It seemed to finally dawn on her how serious the situation was. In a video published by one outlet 2 years after the incident, in 2024, Janine can be seen laughing as she recounts what happened. But as soon as the detective charged her with manslaughter, the smile froze on the teenager's face. Antonetta Stevens and Janine Gonzalez were charged with aggravated assault, robbery, and manslaughter. Both women were held in custody pending trial. When the detectives informed Daniel Gonzalez about what had happened and that Ashley Baconegra had died from her injuries, the man was incredibly upset by the news. Later that evening, Daniel told the investigators that his relationship with Antonetta had been deteriorating for a long time. And when she asked him about his affair with Ashley that day, he told her that Stevens no longer attracted him physically. Daniel handed over his phone to the detectives and agreed to have his personal correspondence extracted. Thanks to this, the investigators were able to read a message Ashley sent him immediately after the attack. She wrote that she was struggling to breathe, that it felt like her heart was skipping beats, and that she was going to the emergency room. Her message said she was fine until Janine kicked her in the back, in the heart and chest area. It was clear that, although Ashley continued on her way after the attack, she didn't realize the severity of her injuries. Then the officers had to tell Julian Ryers, Ashley's boyfriend, about her relationship with Daniel and the brutal attack by her rival. The man hadn't yet recovered from the grief of losing a loved one when he was forced to learn about his fiancée's affair from the detectives. He was completely devastated and crushed by grief. And then Julian had to go and tell his 7-year-old son that his mother had died and would never come home again. That was even harder. When the case went to trial, the evidence was irrefutable. The prosecution team presented the video recording, text messages, and witness testimonies that painted a clear picture of a premeditated attack driven by jealousy and a desire for revenge. According to the emergency room doctor, Ashley Baconegra's injuries were the result of an extremely brutal attack, and it was obvious that the force used far exceeded what would have been needed for simple intimidation. By the way, the video Janine recorded during the fight was so brutal and graphic that the media didn't publish it in full, only posting individual fragments on their online pages. Neither Antonetta nor Janine pleaded guilty. Janine tried her hardest to prove she wasn't involved, that she was merely an unwilling witness. However, it was the schoolgirl who recorded the crime on her phone camera, and the footage showed her kicking Ashley in the head and ribs 3 times. Given that Baconegra died from internal bleeding and a ruptured liver, there was a high likelihood that this could have been directly caused by Janine's kicks. It didn't take the jury long to reach a verdict, and Antonetta and Janine were found guilty and sentenced to 20 years in prison for manslaughter and robbery. Antonetta claimed she didn't intend to harm her rival, that the situation simply got out of control. The video clearly captured her repeatedly threatening to kill Ashley. Moreover, the brutality of the attack itself indicated that Stevens deliberately kicked, hit, and pulled the hair of her fiancé's mistress, intending to cause her as much pain as possible. After Ashley's death, her family tried to learn to live again, and her son was still too young to fully grasp the depth of the tragedy. Friends and relatives rallied to support Julian and his son, creating a GoFundMe page to help with funeral expenses and provide financial support for the future. They managed to raise $7,000. GoFundMe is a platform that allows people to raise funds for various purposes: medical expenses, education, emergencies, charitable projects, and more. But despite the immense support from the community, it didn't ease the pain of Ashley's loved ones from her loss. A woman who sought love and simply wanted to be happy was brutally deprived of her future. The news of the senseless act of violence and its tragic outcome shocked everyone who knew Ashley Baconegra. Unrestrained jealousy and uncontrollable rage also robbed 3 young boys of their mothers in one fell swoop. Antonetta Stevens' sons will now have to grow up without her as well. What should have been a conflict that could have been resolved through conversation or separation escalated into violence. The death of a young woman was not only a personal tragedy for those who loved her, but also a stark example of how jealousy can lead to unthinkable consequences. If you have finished watching, you are a real fan of true crime. Subscribe to the channel, turn on the bell notifications, and put the like. See you in the next video.